Do you ever think to yourself, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing with my life?
Well, we don't either, but we've learned some things along the way that have gotten us a little bit closer to being functioning adults.
Or at least we've learned to fake it well enough.
Welcome to Insert Verb Here, your friendly neighborhood advice podcast by two girls who are just as clueless as you are.
I'm Jordan.
And I'm Haley. And we are Verb. Hello, Jordan.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. My stomach hurts today. But it's because I made muffins and I think I used the wrong ingredient. So I did it to myself.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
It's okay.
How are you?
I'm better. Much
Yeah,
better.
well, Haley and I have both been having a rough couple weeks.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, we were feeling the exact same way.
And we didn't realize. I feel like for these
No.
last 2 weeks, we felt very alone and no one understands what we're going through. And then we finally tell each other and we're like, oh,
wait a second.
we're feeling the exact same way right now.
Yeah.
Well, but today's better.
Yeah,
I feel like
today's
today's
better.
a much better day. I woke up a lot better.
That's
I'm
good.
still not obviously it's still there, but I feel like it's affecting me less than it has been yesterday specifically. So
Yeah, that's good.
I think moral of the story, I bottled it all up for 2 weeks. Finally told him about it. Had a whole day where it was awful, where I had to just deal with it and process it and try it. I couldn't really we and me and also Jordan.
We and me and also Jordan. Sounds like a bad movie title.
Kind of Jordan was there for that when I told her about that. Kind of came to the conclusion that there's not really anything I can do about it.
Yeah.
But then that actually made it worse.
Yeah.
So it's a whole thing. But then now I feel like today it's all been at least processed. So I'm feeling it's not affecting me as much. So moral of the story, don't bottle it up. Deal with it.
My thing was, I was feeling like that. I talked to Haley about it. I talked to my best friend Catherine about it. And Catherine and I send each other videos through text message because I'm an awful texter and I'm awful at responding.
Yes.
And I'm awful at putting things into written words, but I can send a video very easily. So I was sending videos to Catherine and I was just a hot mess express. I was eating chocolate covered nuts. I was dropping them everywhere. I tried to eat one and it tasted old and nasty. It was just a hot mess, and I dropped and spilled my water at one point. It was just, and all I could do was laugh at myself. You know when those days are happening, you're like, oh my God, what are the chances? Nothing can go right.
Yep.
I hate everything. I'm dumb. I hate just all those negative thoughts.
Yeah.
That's what was in a way was happening, but I just chose to laugh at it and be like, okay, Jordan, you're just one of those days, you're a hot mess today, and that's okay. And then Catherine and I ended up FaceTiming, and we just spent the whole time laughing from 9 o'clock last night to 1 in the morning. We both have Apple laptop Mac computers now. And so we learned how to share screens, and we were hacking into each other's screens and putting things on our computer. And she started, I have a group chat with one of my friends or a couple of my friends, and she started typing into the group chat and it was just so funny. And so it ended up just turning my day around, just laughing. The power of laughter, I think, is really what's important. So some days might feel so heavy and just so you're lost and desperate and numb and empty. But I think in those moments, if you can, find the lightness and the laughter, because that's at least what helped me yesterday. Yeah. Anyway, that's the end of my rant.
Spiel.
So we're going to get this started with the first question.
There you go.
Which is identifying personal strengths.
Interesting. A good question.
How do you identify personal strengths?
So, when I was doing some research for this episode, I found lifehack.org, and they have 6 steps to identifying your personal strength. The first step is to know yourself, which I feel like is pretty self-explanatory in
but it's hard.
Really?
Yeah, when I have to take a personality, not one of those BuzzFeed quizzes or like Myers-Briggs or, one of those things. I always feel like I can't answer the questions. I have to ask my friends, like, do you think I'm like am I loyal, unique, nice, funny? Like, what am I? And then like they'll have to tell me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because I don't want to click on something and my friends are like, oh, you think that's what you are? Or if it's because I truly like I rely on my friends to tell me who I am because I don't truly know who I am.
Interesting. 'Cause I'm just very self-aware. I'm very much an internal, and I always know myself. That was
She always knows herself, but not the end of that sentence.
No, I don't. Not at all. Actually, this is a side note. I always know. I know myself, but I know myself through what I don't like rather than what I do like. I don't notice my strengths or what I do like in my life. Except for if it's like something like, oh, I know I like these type of video games. I know I like these types of books. Like that kind of stuff. It's when it's that kind of way. But if it's something like my personal strengths, I know. Actually, Zane and I had a really good conversation about this last night. And he was saying that the reason, because like I said, I'm a very negative person. For me, when I'm looking at my negative aspects of my life, I'm noticing those a lot more. Whereas for my strengths, I don't feel it as much as I would if I didn't do it as often. Because we were saying we did the website for Verb, and he was like, you literally threw that together in like 2 days.
Yeah.
Like someone was like, oh yeah, we need to do a website for Verb. And I literally like in a day I was like, oh yeah, here we go. I got it. And he's like, that is like, people can't do that. No. And like just a bunch of different things like that. But I minimize my strengths because they don't feel like they're anything. They don't feel substantial like my weaknesses do. And so we talked about that last night, and about like how it's important to realize that because it doesn't feel grand, you minimize your strengths because you don't notice them that much. It's like, oh yeah, I just did that. Like, yeah, not a big deal. Like, it doesn't, whatever. It's like, I can just do that. And he's like, but those things that you do like that are actually huge strengths that a lot of other people cannot. So yeah, all that to say, first point was to know yourself. That was a long. Number 2, here you go back to Jordan. Ask a friend.
Oh, yeah.
Ask a friend what your strengths are.
Yeah.
And what they think your strengths are. So
don't be ashamed. It's not embarrassing.
No.
You got to learn somewhere. And sometimes people, this is what I've learned in my old age, that sometimes people on the outside aren't bogged down of the emotional weight of things and just can see things as they are. So sometimes not all the time, because sometimes you need the emotion to understand like what's truly going on.
Yeah.
But sometimes people on the outside, since they're not bogged down by the emotional weight of things, can see things in a clearer way.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's embarrassing to ask people. Don't be ashamed of it. You got to start somewhere, and sometimes people just have a better idea. Yeah. And that's okay.
And also because like we all have,
make sure it's people you trust.
Yeah. Because we all can have personal biases against ourselves. Yeah. And so it makes it harder, like you said, to be objective and look at yourself that way sometimes.
Objective, that's the word.
Got you. Because we have those biases against ourselves, so that ends up, like I said, minimizing the good and maximizing the bad. And so it makes it difficult to identify. So asking other people can be very, very helpful. The third step is to find clues in your attempts and your failures.
In your failures. Let's say it again. Find clues in your failures.
Yeah. I mean, we had an episode.
I think it was our first one.
Yeah, it was our first one.
Which is titled Our First Podcast.
Yes.
Welcome to Insert Verb Here, our first podcast or something like that.
And you should listen to it.
Came out July 20th,
you should.
2020. So your failures are very your failures are very important. Actually, on our Instagram, let me find it real fast. A girl commented on one of our posts.
Yes, Izzy
H, and she said something I want to share about was your first question, which we
asked, what would you do if you could never fail? And that prompted the question, if you can never fail, are your successes satisfying? Do you feel the satisfaction of reaching success when you never fail in your life? So
Izzy commented on our Instagram and said Something I want to share about your first question is when I was in 4th grade, my teacher would always get kids in class that failed a test or failed a class. Every time someone was upset about failing, he would say, "A fail is a first attempt in learning. If we don't fail, we can never really learn." And she said, I don't know, that just stuck with me, and I felt maybe someone could use that or help them out. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of your failures.
Mm-mm.
You should, because that means you're trying, it means you're growing, and it means you can learn from something.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, identify your personal strength through failures. I think that's great.
And
it's brilliant.
Going off of that, I'm going to go into the next question. But this made me think, because we talked about fear of failure, but we also in that same episode talked about Jordan's fear of success. And so number 4 is analyze your successes. So both don't be afraid of failure, but don't be afraid to look into your success and
I think
analyze.
That's important for both of us, because you just said that you downplay what you're good at to focus on the negative.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid of coming off as arrogant, I guess, or self-involved or whatever. So I don't like to talk about successes, and I'm like, oh, well, I did it, cool, but move on. Like, why harp on it? So I think
both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think challenging ourselves to view our success is something we both need to do.
I agree. And then number 5 on the list is to maintain a hold on your identity. And so I feel like that's a big...
Yeah,
that's something that I'm
explain that more.
So the way that they kind of talk about it in their thing is like, if you are, let's say you're trying to be a good employee or a good parent, to do those things and find your strengths in that, you need to have a solid grip on your self-identity. So then you can then...
be sure in yourself so you can give to others.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Be sure of what you can do. So you can fully help that other person, or be there for that other person,
or do the best work that you possibly can, and whatever you're trying to do.
And you wouldn't like second guess yourself or doubt yourself.
Exactly.
You'd be confident and self-assured.
Yeah, I guess that's I think that's the biggest thing, is like, it's that having confidence in yourself that I am capable of doing this, and using that to, because if you are dealing with a bunch of like self-criticism and
not feeling worthy,
the whole point is having that confidence in yourself. If you are feeling self-doubt and self-criticism and you aren't feeling worthy, then it's harder to identify those strengths. If you have,
and people will see that.
If you have the confidence in yourself to know this is the person that I am, then you can use that to then identify those strengths and be confident in knowing that that's...
And you can bring all that to the table and more, and then you can grow your strengths. It doesn't mean you have to be good at everything. It doesn't like, you can, and of course you're still going to be insecure about things, and that doesn't mean it's going to solve all your problems.
It's just going to take practice.
Yeah, and it's going to take a long time. So list off those 5 things again. The 5 key things.
Know yourself. Ask a friend. Find clues in your attempts and failures.
Key.
Analyze your successes. And maintain a hold on your identity.
Great. So that's how you identify personal strengths. I think those are all really good and really important.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say also, I think the more you become aware of your personal strengths and identifying them, like we said, it will help you gain self-confidence and self-awareness, and in a way, a deeper understanding of other people and their strengths. Because then you'll have the confidence in yourself to go, oh, this isn't what I succeed at. This isn't one of my strengths. But Haley over here, she rocks at this.
Yeah.
So I can go to her for this. And you won't feel insecure and like you can't do something and a failure, because you know what you're good at.
Yeah.
And you'll be secure enough in yourself to be like, oh, that's okay that I can't do this. Because I don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
And you'll be, I think, being self-assured is a key thing that's going to come from that.
I agree.
So, speaking of, on the opposite end of being self-assured, can personal strengths be seen as a weakness by others?
So, when I was thinking through this, I actually had a lot of problems thinking through how it could be seen as a weakness by others.
I can.
See,
but I don't think this anymore, but when I was younger, I thought crying was a sign of weakness. I do not think that anymore. I think people who cry, go you, man. You're vulnerable, you're true, you know how you're feeling.
Yeah.
I think it's a strength, actually.
Yeah.
But like in middle school, I was like, I was the kind of girl that I was like, I don't cry. Like, if, people would be like, oh my gosh, when was the last time you cried? I was like, 4 years ago. Like, I used to pride myself on the fact that I never cried. And like in a movie, if a sad part came up, it'd be like, Jordan, don't cry. You're weak. Don't cry. Don't cry. So I would challenge myself and push myself to not cry because I saw that as a weakness.
Yeah.
And that meant I wasn't, that people wouldn't see me as a strong person, that I was just this, I don't know, I guess emotional thing, which is still a strength. Being in tune with your emotions is a strength. So back then, young, immature, confused Jordan did view like in that way, that as a weakness.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much the only thing I can think of. But I mean, I guess it depends. Like some people's personal strengths could be like art, and being creative. Some people might not see a point in being creative. And they're like, oh, you need to be logical. You need to do something that makes sense. That's not going to get you anywhere. That's not going to do anything for you or anybody else. Like, so, I mean, I guess there will always be people who do see what you view as your strength as pointless and a weakness, I guess.
I think this is kind of a side note to everything. I think it's very interesting, and I've noticed it in the past as well, but this one too, that you are very others focused when you answer questions, and I'm very self-focused. Not necessarily myself, but when I think of people viewing themselves. And so when I thought of this question, I had trouble with the others part, but I knew exactly how your own strengths could also be a weakness to you.
Oh, interesting.
And so like that's kind of where I
okay, let's hear that.
So basically like I think that
I love that we have two different ways of going about questions.
Yeah. And I've noticed it in the past too when we've talked about other things, that you always come from a position of looking outwards and looking at what other people, like towards other people, and I'm very much focused on inwards. Yeah, so basically I think that strengths cannot be weaknesses in themselves, but how they are applied to a situation can make it a weakness.
What a saucy answer.
Right? So an example of that, let's say your strength is being very responsible and you're a very responsible person. That can become, it's not a weakness in itself, but it can become a weakness because you can take too much on and overload yourself and then be burdened by all of these responsibilities that you've taken on.
Yeah.
Or something like if your strength is communication, but let's say you're in a conversation and your needs are not being met by the other person, it can lead to you over talking and rambling and going on and on and on in a situation where you probably shouldn't be doing that. And so once again, that strength of communication can become a weakness. So I don't think that any strength is a weakness in itself, but depending on how you apply it to the situation you're in, it can be.
Oh, that's interesting. Fair.
Yeah.
I think, both are fair. How others view it, and if other people view your strength as a weakness, poo-poo on them. Okay? If it's a personal strength to you, going from the other's point of view, if it's a personal strength to you, it's a personal strength to you, and I don't think others should tell you if it's an actual true personal strength because they're not living your life.
No.
But, like Haley said,
they can be weaknesses to yourself. And so I think that's kind of the key with that. It's like if other people see them as weaknesses, you're right. They're not living your life. And so you need to use that, your strengths, how you need to use them, and not focus on what other people see as a weakness, because it's not for you. It might be their weakness, but it's not your weakness. And so instead of being bogged down by like, oh, they see this as a quote unquote bad thing, say, no, we just have different lives. We're different people, different experiences and different circumstances that you are living through, that your strength might come into play a lot more than it does into their life. And so just realizing that, but then being aware that you can create your own weaknesses through your strengths.
And be adapting to it. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And then our last question today, it comes from Miss Rebecca. And she asked on Instagram at Rebecca_Rose_R cubed. I hope that's right. But she is so sweet and she's so involved in us and our social media, and she's just so sweet. And sorry, Rebecca, this is coming out a week late. This was the third question we were going to ask last week that we didn't get to, so we pushed it to this week.
Side note, you say a week late. This episode won't come out for like a month and a half.
That's true.
So let's just not. Yeah. So.
But she asks how to deal with self-criticism, which I think
is a great question.
A great question. I was going to say all women deal with it, but everyone, even men deal with it.
Even men, non-binary, trans, everyone.
Everyone. Every person in this world, to some extent, at some point in their life, has dealt with self-criticism.
Oh, yeah. Some people more than others.
Yes.
I think this is, I feel like it's going to be interesting, this question, because it's something that we both have a hard time with. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this conversation, it's going to be interesting because it's not coming from a place of because I've recently listened to another podcast and they were talking about self-criticism.
Traitor. Just kidding.
Shut up. It was research, okay? I was recently listening to another podcast and they talked on self-criticism. Mm-hmm. But they both came from a place of they used to be really critical on themselves, but they've overcome it since then.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah, good for them.
One day.
But like, I think it'll be interesting coming from a place of us not really being
fully there.
Being fully there. I feel like we've gotten better.
Yeah.
But neither of us are fully there.
Yeah.
And not different. We're both at different levels in our kind of healing too.
Yeah.
And so I think this will be interesting. So to start out, I got pretty much the definition of self-criticism. Okay. Self-criticism involves how an individual evaluates oneself. Self-criticism in psychology is typically studied and discussed as a negative personality trait in which a person has a disrupted self-identity. It is often associated with depression.
One thing in that definition that I will disagree with is that it said it's often negative.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking the same thing.
I'm going to go...
Well, they did say often. They did not say always.
Self-criticism can be positive. You have to have some level of self-criticism to grow and see what you need to improve on.
Yeah. But I feel like in the context of what she's asking and just in general, most of us do lean toward the negative aspect. It's 100%. More, I would say that the negative aspect around self-criticism is more common than positive. Because you're right. It does take a little bit of positive self-criticism to grow and to better yourself. And so, I agree with you, but I feel like just in general, most of us deal with more in the negative end than the positive.
I agree. So I was on thriveglobal.com, and they have a post from February of this year that says how to overcome self-criticism. I think it's a short article, but I think it dives in really well. So it says being self-critical and the way you talk to yourself can tear you down when the negative voices in your head start interrupting your positive thoughts when it's not the fact. That is not your truth. It's limiting beliefs that have been programmed into your subconscious. It says, embrace that part of you, embrace those negative thoughts, that the parts that you're feeling critical of, give it kindness and ask yourself what you need to learn from it and what's causing you to feel like this, what's causing you to criticize yourself in this way, what's limiting your beliefs, and what are these thoughts trying to tell you. And if it's telling you you're worthless, you're a failure, you're not the body type you want, you're dumb, like, why are you feeling this way? And not say, because I am, because that's not true.
Yeah.
It's just going to be really challenging it's going to be really hard to poke through and wade through all these negative thoughts to get to the root of it. It's going to be so incredibly hard and stressful and anxiety ridden, and you may not be at a point to do that right now, and that's okay. But just be conscious of those thoughts and just know that those negative thoughts aren't you. And then the article goes on to say we get so used to being hard on ourselves that we're no longer aware of it. And I also wanted to say, really important, that self-criticism does not mean you're a failure. It is not your current reality. It may be your current thought process and how you are currently feeling, but is not your reality, which is really hard just separate the two, because oftentimes your thoughts you feel like are your reality.
Yeah.
Which is not the case
No.
at all. So I don't know, just it's a really tough topic. They go on to say like distance yourself, identify what may trigger you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you made a really good point about that is not your true self. That these are thought processes that were created. And that a lot of the time, like most people who deal with this a lot, it was usually from something that happened in childhood, early childhood, something that stuck with them and shaped them into this. So this
That bully on the playground, or that parent who
or
said some side comment that just ended up sticking with you forever.
Like there's whatever caused it.
That dog denying you one time when you were getting a pet. Like it could seem so small and singular to someone else, but it's how it impacted you.
Exactly. But then like
that doesn't make it not valid.
And then no, it doesn't make it not valid. And then that sticks with you for a long time
and grows.
Then grows and gets bigger, and then you're building this habit of constantly thinking through this same thought process that isn't who you truly are. That was something that was created, you know? And so just remembering that, and like I know like way back when I was in kind of the peak of my depression, the way that Zane and I would talk about it back then, I mean, I was young, I was like 17, and so we would call it my monsters. And so when I had those thought processes, he'd be like, remember, this isn't you, this is your monsters talking to you. And so it was remembering that when I'm going through things like this is not my true thoughts, this is the monsters that are saying these things to me, because they, like, another thing we also say is that my feelings are true, but my emotions lie to me.
And yes, so very very I like
that's
that.
What we always like. That's what
your
we always
feelings
say.
Are always valid,
but that does not mean that they can't lie to you.
Yes,
and that they can't create situations that are not actually there. And that's something that I struggle with a lot. And so just remembering that like these things aren't you. And obviously that in the moment that doesn't always help. Sometimes it can, putting it into perspective, and it kind of helps to calm you down.
But getting to that place where you can pull yourself out of it to put it in perspective is very challenging.
Yeah.
Especially when you think that this is your truth. If you think you are a failure, if you're like, whether you think you're too skinny or too big, like that at that moment you feel is your truth.
Yeah.
And so pulling yourself away from that is something that's really hard, and it's going to take a lot of practice.
Yeah.
So I think identify what you're criticizing, whether you failed that test and you're like, I studied so hard on it. I put all I could do into it, and I still, bombed it. I'm never going to be worth anything, because look, once again, I tried something else, and look, I failed. I failed at every little thing I do.
Yeah.
Or like this relationship, like I gave this person my whole entire heart, and all they did was, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
These negative feelings and thoughts, and how you are viewing yourself as worthless. Like even yesterday, I was telling Haley before we started filming that I was on TikTok.
Yeah.
And there was this trend that was going around, and it made me feel very worthless, and like I wasn't doing anything with my life. And it started to really get me down, and I could feel that wave of emptiness and sadness and self-hatred like coming, and I could feel it bubbling inside of me. And I said, I can't. So I got off TikTok. I got off my phone.
Yeah.
Because I felt it, and I was like, Jordan, you can't do this. You can't do this to yourself. So once I noticed it coming, I was able to separate myself from it and do something else to get my mind off that, which made me feel better. So I think first step is being aware, and then practicing how to distance yourself from that, and turning what you feel like is your truth into, like, there was
challenging it.
Yeah, there was something that I felt was true and was fact for my whole life, from when I was 7 until I was about in college. And my whole entire life, I thought it was true. And it was actually what I had always thought to myself was one time validated by someone who was very close to me. The one time I brought it up.
Yeah.
When I was in high school. And it wrecked me, and it ruined me. And I was like, oh, well, okay, I always just thought myself of this. And then when the one time I brought it up to this person, they validated it without purposely valid. Like I wasn't like, hey, do you think of me as blah, blah, blah? It was a general, we were talking about this general thing.
And then it got brought up.
And then this person said what I had always thought about myself. And I was like, oh, well, they think that. So therefore it is true. And it took years and years until and a lot of self-hatred, a lot of absolute despair, and learning and reteaching your brain, retraining your brain. Because when you believe this to be true, like there is nothing, like if you're like me, there's nothing stopping me from believing that this is true. And then I thought I was over it a couple years ago. I thought I had learned that it's not true. But then a couple weeks ago in June, actually, it came back up, and I got in my head again about it. I started believing it again. And the cycle kind of started all over again for me. I had to, over a couple weeks, go try to knock myself out of it. So anyway, that's a long way of saying self-criticism. To me, the biggest thing is thinking it's true. And it's not. No matter what it is, if you think you're dumb, you're not. You're brilliant. You're smart. Just because you're not good at one particular task does not mean you're good at something else. I'm not good at English, if you can't tell. I'm not good at writing. I'm not good at, blah, blah, blah. So in school, I just, thought I was dumb because of that. But I'm really good at math and science. So that's my strength, and I can focus on that. So I try not to get bogged down in what you feel is negative. Just focus on what is good and retrain your brain when those thoughts come. And that is the end of my speech. Haley, I'm passing it to you.
I had a couple thoughts on that. First of all, I haven't looked too much into it, but it's something that I've been kind of interested in, is this whole, I think it's psychology therapy thing, called reparenting yourself. Because basically a lot of our problems come from emotional trauma from childhood, from whatever a parent did, whatever, we didn't feel love from a parent, we didn't feel supported, we didn't do this,
or from a parental figure,
not necessarily a parent, but from a authority figure you trusted and looked up to. And so it's this whole concept of basically, as an adult, reparenting yourself to rewind all that damage and then do it, essentially do it over, like you said, relearning it in a better mindset and giving yourself the needs that weren't met, essentially. And I haven't looked too much into it, but I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
Because you said that and it reminded me of that. Like there's this whole thing around that about reparenting and like inner child therapy and things like that to get over these things that happened in childhood that have stuck with us our entire lives. And so like you were saying, like reframing, rethinking, learning again, and that kind of just made me think about that. So that sounds something that you're interested in. Look more into it. I haven't looked that much into it, but it seems like it sounds really interesting, and also like exactly what you're talking about. But obviously from a professional
not us,
they know what they're doing. And then the other thing,
surprise, guys, we are actually as professional as we sound all the time, which guys, I know it's a huge surprise. Y'all didn't know, but we are not actually therapists. We both went to acting school essentially. So surprise, guys. I know y'all didn't know that, but please, if you want to seek help, I suggest professional help. And if you can't afford it, which is what my reasoning was my whole life, we're working on finding affordable ways to get therapy. So hopefully that will be on our website soon. We will let you know when it is up there. But in the meantime, don't be afraid to, this is a side tangent that has nothing to do with self-criticism, but don't be afraid to reach out to loved ones that you trust,
friends that you trust,
and try to Google maybe an affordable therapist around you.
And then the other thing I was going to say that you also brought up that's just kind of a good reminder for all of us is that you thought that you had gotten over this. And then it came back later. And that's something that I've actually been dealing with lately. Like we mentioned it before, we've both been having a rough time. And so, what I was having a rough time over, I was sad about it, but it was kind of very much like, yeah, this is bad. It's worse than normal, but like I'm totally fine. It's just something that I'm kind of going through. And so I was dealing with it like that. And through that, it brought up all of this unhealed trauma. And all this stuff that I thought I was over. It was all this stuff from my childhood and
when you
my young
think you're
adulthood.
over it and then it rears its ugly head back, at least me, and I feel like you as well, feel so like a failure. And you start criticizing yourself, like, why am I not over this? Why am I holding on to this? Why am I so dumb that like I'm starting to believe this again? What's wrong with me that I'm starting to believe this again? Nothing is wrong with you.
And not only just believing that, it starts to make you believe things that you like, other things that you also,
it kind of railroads.
Like for me, like a big thing that I've always kind of dealt with, and I still do, but not at all like I used to, is worthlessness. And feeling like in friendships that people don't value my friendship and they don't value what I can bring to a relationship. And so I always felt this sense of worthlessness and abandonment and all these things like that I haven't thought in so long. And then this little issue, and then it brought all this up and started bringing me back into that mindset.
When you have those self-critical thoughts, like you're not enough, how do you, what are ways that you deal and possibly cope with it?
Cry.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, yeah, I'm a crier. Actually, I've gotten to adulthood. I've cried a lot less, but like when I was young, I cried every 20 minutes.
I'm getting to adulthood and I'm crying more.
We switched.
How do you feel when people say it's all in your head? Does that make it better for you? Or does that make it worse? Because you're like, I know it's all in my head. It doesn't change anything. Or are you like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
I don't mind it as long as my feelings are still validated. Because that's something that if my feelings aren't validated, I'm going to crawl into a closet and never leave. But like because that's the thing, like I said, I'm very self-aware because I'm very self-critical. It's a double-edged sword. It's both terrible, but then also very good because it means I can grow from that because I know what I need to work on. I would be like, oh yeah, that's all in my head. It's, I did that. Like I was being dramatic and it was all in my head and I built this up way bigger than I needed
again
it to.
But I've done that in the past, and then I felt shameful and dumb for feeling like that, and then I started criticizing myself for being like, why did you blow that up so much? You're so dumb. So I want to put out there for those who might feel the same way, and if it's just me, okay, cool. I'm gonna say it for me to possibly listen to later. Your feelings are still valid, like Haley was saying. Your feelings are still valid just because you may feel like it was dramatic, and maybe it was a dramatic reaction, but your feelings are valid at the time. Yeah. So I think that's something that you need to remember. It's not true. Like the thing might not be true.
No. But your feelings are valid.
But your feelings are still valid.
Yeah.
So anyway, how to deal with self-criticism. We got so...
I don't know if there's much of a recap for that. There was a lot.
I think telling yourself that your emotions are valid, but trying to step away from what is triggering that. No, identifying what's triggering that.
Putting it into perspective.
And just knowing that your feelings are valid, but that is not the truth. Yeah. You are not how you potentially perceive yourself at that time. You are more, you are better. Yeah. If you fail at that sport, at that skill, at that whatever, that is not who you are. You can keep practicing to overcome that. Or, that just might not be your strength, and that's okay. And there's something else you're going to succeed at, and that is your strength. And if it's a body image, self-criticism, it's going to take a lot of practice.
A lot of time.
And it's not your truth. It's the biggest thing. It's not your reality. You may feel like it's your reality, but it's not. Which I don't know if it actually helps.
It helps. That's something that for me has helped a lot recently, and not only in just my emotions and the things that I do as well. And like, knowing that obviously there are days where I need to have a rest day and to do nothing, but realizing that my truth isn't sitting around all day and eating junk food and watching TV and doing nothing. There are days where I need that because everyone needs days like that, and that's just a part of self-care. But knowing that that's not who I am, or knowing that like,
or you know what, even going to like body positivity stuff, and self-criticism in that world, even if you do view yourself as, not where you want to be, like too skinny, too big or whatever. So what? What's wrong with that? What's like, if one of your friends or loved ones came up to you with these complaints, you wouldn't say, yeah, you're right, so I don't like you because of that. You'd be like, oh my gosh, no, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous. No, like, we can, find ways to make you feel better about yourself. But no, you are a gorgeous human being and I love you no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter. So why can't you give that love to yourself? If you would do that to someone else and love them for who they are and what they look like, no matter what they look like, you should do the same for yourself. And it's very hard because you have to live in your own skin and you have to live in your own body and you have to see yourself every day. But what's the difference between your loved one and yourself? So I think when it comes to body self-criticism, practicing self-love, which I know is so, like, when I used to hear that as a kid, I was like, oh, that's so dumb.
It's the truth, though.
But it is true. Like,
even if I don't want to do it all the time.
Love yourself like you would love your friend who is hating on themselves. And you'd be like, no, listen here, my lovely friend.
Well, you wouldn't invalidate their feelings, but then try to show them.
Exactly.
Show them the love and the truth.
So do that to yourself. And that is this episode. Make sure to check us out on social media at GotVerb or at our website, verbofficial.com. And send us your questions at askivhpod@gmail.com.
We post new podcast episodes every Monday, so subscribe to Insert Verb Here so you can insert verb into your daily routine.